Welcome to this latest edition of the Food Systems Podcast, brought to you by the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. I'm your host, Mark Titterington, and today it's my great pleasure to be talking to Stefania Avanzini, Director of One Planet Business for Biodiversity. Stefania, absolutely terrific to have you with us. Good friend of the Forum, I know. Just perhaps for our listeners that may be a little bit less familiar with OP2B and its evolution, just give us a sense of what you're trying to achieve and the way you're going about it.
Thank you, Mark, for the invitation. A pleasure to be here. My first time. So One Planet Business for Biodiversity, OP2B, as you said, was founded 5 years ago. I would say by a group of quite forward-looking CEOs of agribusinesses that had understood at that time their impacts and dependencies on agriculture, on soil health, and on nature and biodiversity, and had said, we probably have a role to play because farmers farm the way they farm because of the current incentive schemes in place, and we are sending demand signals for that. So we have a role to play to contribute to transform agricultural models and bring back nature and soil health in agriculture. And just to give you an idea, now because we just published a few weeks ago our 5-year report, OP2B members were around approximately 25 members. They have committed to transform 12.5 million hectares of agricultural land by 2030 in Europe. This is approximately 15% of agricultural land. That's the size that they are representing and committing to. They have already invested in the past 5 years, from 2019 to today, 3.6 billion euros into the transition, so into supporting farmers to transition towards more agroecological, regenerative, and sustainable farming practices. And so just to give you some ideas on where they stand. So these are definitely active agribusinesses that have understood that they have a role to play to transform the agricultural value chains and their own businesses as well.
You talked about the CEOs coming together to do that. I mean, I recall this at the time. I mean, they were very much ahead of the time. And when you think particularly about the recent focus on soil health that kind of came back into view, I think OP2B could certainly take some of the credit for helping to drive that onto the agenda. You've talked a little bit there about some of the progress that you've made over the last 5 years. If you took a step back, where do you think we overall are on the journey to transforming the food system? We talk at the Forum about that being sustainable, climate smart, nature positive. And perhaps maybe a few thoughts on what you think we collectively need to do, perhaps to accelerate.
Thank you for sharing. I think this is the crucial question. And I think there is one good news is, fundamentally, we are aligning on the North Star, and we are probably using in different forums different semantics, and that's why I was also using different words. But when we're looking at concretely on the ground, at farm level or in specific landscapes, what are the impacts that we are all trying to measure, reward farmers for, and actually us as company think are important that we give visibility and report on across our supply chains. And I think there is a strong consensus. We have understood that the land-based or agricultural and land use transition is a holistic one, that farmers need to be at the center. They actually are the one driving the transition, so they are leading it. And so it needs to be benefit and profitable for farmers. And actually there is evidence that there is. That's number one. Secondly, we have understood that restoring our natural, the agriculture and natural ecosystem is key. So bringing back nature, really having a strong focus on soil health, on water, is key. And of course, the importance that it also has is to decrease our climate emissions and footprint. So I think we're quite aligned on the overall objectives and impacts. And here I can even. But we're still not there with the semantic, and I still think we are starting to be aligned, but it's still a very small group of people. So there is a real need to spread that alignment and probably also create a very compelling and positive narrative to engage the whole sector, so to go beyond the convinced ones. Just to give you an idea, it's still small, but I think we did contribute to this. In the past 2 years, we tried to gather over 50 of our members who also go beyond the OP2B coalition, really 50 agribusinesses, and then partners, like Sci Platform, Cool Farm Tool, Textile Exchange, who represent them. They represent approximately 1,100 businesses, and we try to align on those core key indicators. And we did land on 10 key impacts dimensions and indicators. So there starts to be that consensus, but I think we're still quite far away if we're thinking about the energy transition, where there is such a strong alignment that renewable is the way to go. When we're looking at agri-food systems transformation, it is more complex, and we don't have one single word or like the right simple narrative that says this is the way to go.
I think that point that you make about, 2 points actually into what you said, certainly come to my mind. The complexity of our chain, I think, is more than what you find in other sectors, which I think is sometimes why it feels so hard to crack. And I think also, notwithstanding the efforts that you guys have made, we haven't moved quick enough on this journey collectively as a sector. We talked a lot about it, but it's needed groups like yours, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years, to start to come together to drive pace. One thing I do want to just touch on, you mentioned it. We talk a lot about farmers being at the center of this, and I know we've talked offline about this, Stefania. How much are we making the progress that we need to be in engaging farmers and helping them to see the benefits, see the profitability, if I might say, from this transition that we're trying to affect?
To be completely honest, I think we're not doing enough. Where the discourse is there, but if we're thinking about how are we effectively engaging farmers as partners in this transition, because they're the one driving it at the forefront, bearing the cost, the risks, and now also the climate shocks of the transition, we're still lacking some of that unlock. And one of the things that is also needed is for sure coalitions of farmers who are willing to partner and in that transition. And that's more and more. The good news is we see more and more farmer cooperatives that have understood the impacts of climate change and how it is important for them also to invest in the future fit of their agri-food systems. That's also another way we can see it, is our current agri-food system is not future fit anymore. So we need to invest in that future and stop only investing, though it is important, of course, in food sovereignty and food security, but which is very much focused on status quo. How do we shift that investment also to invest in the future is for me an important point. And but the good news is, I think actors in the value chain, so agribusinesses in the value chains, have a strong understanding that we cannot bear the risks and the costs of the transition only on the farmers' shoulders, and that's why they are all stepping up at a different pace. But I can see it. They're all stepping up and understanding it. What is the role that I need to play? Contribute to share the cost and risks of the transition. That's probably one of the main topics that within my coalition and together with financial actors, we're discussing it. What is the role of each actor in the value chain to share the cost and risks of the transition?
Yeah, quite right. And as you know, similar focus for us in the forum as well. There's no one stakeholder that can carry all of these costs, nor should it. But by identifying the ones that can play a role, both public and private, and being creative about that, how we do that, I am optimistic that we can find a way. We should be able to find a way to share the value with farmers on this and make it financially viable for them to make the transition that we want. I recognize we digressed a little bit there, because it kind of touches on the next question that I've kind of got for you, which is, when you look ahead, what's given you, I guess, most cause for concern, but also main reasons to be optimistic that we can deliver this transformation in the agri-food system?
Probably the most cause of concern is that, as you said it before, agriculture is a highly fragmented sector. And so it is one of those sectors where I would really use the word radical collaboration is needed to achieve transformation at scale. And agriculture, more than any other sector, because it also is so dependent on governmental expenditure, on subsidies, to put it shortly, really requires also that political willingness to achieve the transformation at scale. So that probably is one of the first things that worries me, is we need that political willingness to be there in place to drive the transition at the right pace and scale that is needed. That's what worries me. What actually is actually encouraging me. So the good side is I think the private sector is ripe and has understood. Like, as I said, I think that there is a strong consensus that the current agri-food system is not future fit. So many agri-food businesses are today unlocking and investing in the resilience of their supply chain. That's one of the main reasons why they're doing it. And so unlocking private sector budgets to invest in transitioning agricultural models in their supply chain. So there is a private sector and non-state actor willingness, and I think also a lot of farmers, and actually have been doing it for decades, because farmers have been innovating. And so there is a strong willingness from farmers, farmer cooperatives, from agri-food businesses. And that's why when you look at some of the data, I think there is zillions and millions of demo projects. And to achieve that scale, that's when everyone needs to come around the table, and we need to unlock also larger parts of funding. And we in OP2B talk a lot about the need to shift from pilot farms or demo farms, even though if they're larger, to landscape level investments, because that's when we need that shift. And collaboration is one of them. But I see a strong, especially in Europe, I see what we just recently mapped this year to look at how much funding is needed for the transition. Our colleagues Food Drink Europe published that data, around 35 billion euros a year, and we tried to map what is the private sector funding that is available. Very scattered, but it's around 24 billion. So it's not there is some funding available, but what the real challenge that we have today is, how do we move from very scattered, disjointed incentives that are maybe sometimes even hidden, public and private, to a comprehensive financing package for farmers that is easily accessible for farmers, and most importantly, that is joint, so that it enables that shift.
Yeah, quite right. I mean, we talk about almost a kind of new deal for farming to access the benefits of driving the transformation. And as you say, we've got to bring that together if we want the progress that we seek. And it is scattered and fragmented, as you say, at the moment. And we've got to try and bring that together, as I say, in a new deal. I think the encouraging thing is, as you say, the money is there. It's just how do we unlock it and make it visible in a meaningful sense. Your point as well about going from pilots and individual projects to scale, I think also resonates. Perhaps we've had too many of the pilots, and now we need to work on how do we get to scale. And I suppose with that in mind, we obviously saw each other last in New York at Climate Week. We're obviously in the run of some of the big international summits. We had COP16 in Cali and Colombia just this past couple of weeks, and now looking ahead to COP29 in Azerbaijan. I wonder what your takeaways are from those, and how important those events are in galvanizing the necessary action at scale, at the landscape level that you talked about.
Thank you for asking, because I'm actually really just coming back with a little bit maybe of still jet lag from CBD COP16 in Cali. If I take a step back, I think one of the major milestones for us as non-state actors was probably the Emirati declaration that food is finally on the table. So actually food systems and agriculture and food systems are on the table also of the climate agenda. That was at COP28. That important acknowledgement from countries have been made. I think this is important to have in mind, which means that the transformation of agriculture and food systems to meet our climate targets is now acknowledged. What I see is still, for example, coming back from CBD COP16 in Cali, is we're still lacking probably political momentum and also even private sector leadership here to put a lot of new money on the table. Like if we're thinking about no major pledges or investments have been made for nature agriculture. Really came out very strongly from Cali. So I think that is something to keep in mind, that this is, and that's why I was saying one of my causes of concern is to achieve scale in the in the land-based sector, we need a strong political willingness, and of course then matched with also private sector willingness to scale. And probably one of the things that still needs to come out quite clearly for all investors, public and private, is what is my investment case? Why am I investing in transitioning agriculture and food systems? And I think we're starting to hear it. I was saying there is evidence of a positive business case for farmers. There is evidence of more resilience for agribusinesses, supply chains. But I think this needs to be heard more loud and clearly. And ultimately, until nature is on the balance sheet for many companies, that's probably one of the points that they're looking at is, will then my investments in protecting, restoring, and regenerating nature be valorized? Will they be seen as a valuable asset in my balance sheet? And I think that's definitely still lacking and still one of those bottlenecks.
Mm. We're obviously talking in a week where we've just had the US presidential election, and whilst I wouldn't necessarily want to draw you on the outcomes of that, it reflects a year of political change really in many parts of the world, not just the US. We've had change in commission, or impending change in commission in Europe, new EU institutions, the parliamentary elections. We've got political uncertainty in member states. Germany, we're talking today after some of the developments of the coalition government there, and indeed elsewhere. You touched on it. How sensitive do we need to be about the political changes that take place and how they impact on food system transformation? And I suppose what would be your message to governments around the world about their role in helping to drive forward the transformation?
I'm by no means an expert, but as I said, it is probably a cause of personal concern. I think agriculture, as it's so fragmented and also so highly interdependent, we have specialized in agriculture, and so we're depending on free flow of goods and trades to actually have an efficient agricultural model. And so I would say we're highly interdependent between countries, because we're so highly specialized and we're so highly fragmented that I think to achieve agricultural and food systems transformation at scale, the political willingness and influence is critical, and especially then that political cooperation across countries. So in Europe, within Europe, it's easier thanks to our European Union model. But I think also when we're thinking about globally, that is definitely will be one of those bottlenecks. If there is no radical collaboration and cooperation among transforming some of these agricultural models together and sending the same incentives, it will be, then we're talking about competitiveness, and probably the Draghi report here has reminded us also of how this could also hit hard then on the EU economy.
Yeah. Well, look, Stefania, it's been absolutely terrific talking to you and hearing what OP2B is doing, and also some of your thoughts on the challenges and also the opportunities that we face. I mean, certainly we at the Forum value our partnership with you guys, and look forward to working with you and colleagues on all aspects of this, but particularly that element of finance and the transition, which seems to be absolutely critical. Stefania, thanks so much indeed for joining us. It's been a great pleasure to have you with us today, and wishing you every success as you take forward your agenda.
No, thank you so much, Mark, for inviting me. And if indeed very much looking forward to collaborate on the financing the transition agenda. This is our key topic for next year.
Super. Thanks. Well, you've been listening to another edition of the Food Systems Podcast, brought to you by the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time. All for now.